people don't talk about grief. It's not normalized and until you get there. And so I'm just really excited that you're here on the show to talk with us today.
I'm excited to introduce our guest, Barri Leiner Grant, the founder and chief grief officer of the Memory Circle. In 2019, Barri created this unique space to support those learning to live with loss, transforming her longtime career in journalism into a dedicated mission as a certified grief coach and educator. Her journey is deeply personal. After the sudden loss of her mother, Ellen, in 1993, and more recently, the passing of her father, Neil, after a decade with dementia, Barri channels her own experience of grief into helping others find hope and healing. So let's make time for Barri and grief. We are so excited to welcome Barri Leiner Grant to the Make Time podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hi, so nice to have you on.
So good to be with you.
So Helen and I were talking about, maybe we should just get together and do a podcast, the two of us, and we'll talk about grief. I'm going through something that's called anticipatory grief. Helen is walking through grief.
Yes.
And we thought that we could get together and do something like that. And then all of a sudden, here comes Barri, enters stage left. And Barri, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. I lost my mother, Ellen, in 1993. And no one said grief or grieving back then. So I just returned to work. And then over the years, I realized what I really could have gained from paying attention, from tending to my grief. And I became super curious about it. I was a journalist and worked at the Chicago Tribune at the time. And knowing that there were so many people out there who had experienced loss, that I felt like I was the only one who had lost a mom. But of course, I knew otherwise. And slowly, I started doing pure guided work, which was just to collect some other motherless daughters and do events around the beginning of May, when Mother's Day would start to creep up. And it was sort of painful. And I thought, well, why don't we just take back the night? And then people came in whispers and said, do you think you could do this for child loss? And do you think you could do this for father loss? And do you think you could? And I thought, well, I better get my training on. And so I did several certifications, which is so fascinating. What I learned along the way is that most clinicians and doctors don't have any professional grief training in their programs. Sometimes it's an elective in death and dying, which really surprised me. So trainings upon trainings, I, in earnest, left my full-time work and created what I call the Memory Circle, which is a virtual space and also in-person space where we meet one-on-one, and also in grief support circles that support death and non-death loss.
Oh, I have to take a deep breath here. So you were just saying that you were a motherless daughter. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of dawned on me that I'm a daughterless mother. Mm-hmm. And, I've never kind of turned that around right there. So I'm just really grateful that you're here. This is people don't talk about grief. It's not normalized. And until you get there, you really don't understand the levity of just the void that exists around grieving. And so I'm just really excited that you're here on the show to talk with us today.
The first thing I would say that is a practice that I've grown accustomed to is, what is your daughter's name?
Bella.
Bella. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I used to say very hurriedly, like, my mom died. Like, I didn't want to make anybody else sad. And these conversations were not happening freely. We're such a grief illiterate society. And we're so avoidant of anything that, might make anybody else sad. I didn't even want to be the sad girl in the room. And until I started talking about it and realized how much it opened up the conversation and made us all feel like we had a place and space to discuss this. Like, it is a part of all humanity. It's going to happen to all of us. It's the most human thing. As human as birth. It's just that we've made it so sad and quiet and not able to have the kind of conversations that we should and be able to talk about our people. We love them. We lost them. We love them. We want to talk about them. So that's a question I always ask. Tell me their name.
So what is the most important thing that you really feel that grievers or someone grieving needs to make time for, and why?
I call it grief tending, right? What the grief that comes to us, we didn't ask for it, but the way, and we had no control over it, but the way that we show up for it, that we have control over. So I call it grief tending, showing up on purpose with purpose to tend to your grief. And that can show up in many, many ways, but really like penciling it in, making time and space for it, whether that's in a therapist's office, whether that is creating a journaling practice, whether that's ritual, but making space and time for a grief tending practice.
Would you say this is something you do? You would suggest someone do it daily, weekly, just whatever feels right?
I think it's whatever feels right to you. I think it's very hard in acute grief. It's very hard in the early days of death loss. I would say it's very hard. Very well-meaning folks will hand you a journal and say, "Oh, I heard this is really good for you," and your whole life has just changed, and you're sitting in front of this blank slate of what the rest of your life looks like, and also this big blank journal. It's like you wouldn't even know what to do with it. I think in the early days. So I say, yeah, grief tending can mean taking a walk. Grief tending can mean being with your person in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's looking at pictures of them. Maybe it's listening to music. There are so many ways. So when I say showing up for it in some way, yeah, sometimes it's just setting an alarm so that, or penciling it in so that we do make time, dedicated time. Because as you both know, if you don't tend to it, it will come to you. It will come out sideways. It will come out maybe in unhealthy ways.
So I'm just going to double click on this for a minute, because I think that, like I was just living my life and I, texted with my daughter, "I love you, Mom. I love you, Bella. Talk tomorrow." And the next morning I got a call that she was no longer with us. And it was the unthinkable. You don't think about losing your child. It's something that you don't think about. And so I think that tending to your grief, like in that moment and those moments and the early moments, it was very apparent to me that I was like completely broken. And the person that was the helper, the strong person, the reliable friend, the like rock for so many people in my life, I was that girl that you called, and so like the first thing in my journey was I needed to let people help me. And it was very apparent that like I needed to just allow people to help me.
Sure.
And
yeah.
And so in the beginning, I think that it was just such baby steps, to your point. Like I would just sit on my step outside, watch the sky. Like I think, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I allowed myself space. And everyone else around me like supported me in that space, which was super meaningful.
Being able to even have sun on your face, before noon is a great grief tending practice. Sun loss is shocking. The brain has to make sense of where our people have gone. Every single day, we're used to them coming through the door or calling on the phone. And so, our brain really has to catch up to, not accepting that this loss, especially the loss of a child, it's such an out of order loss. But accepting that it has happened. And that takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been incredible to watch Helen on this journey and where you still are, right? Which is fine. Helen is the reliable friend. She is the one that you call. Sometimes I feel like it's important for you to have people continue to show up for you and help you, because I think that is definitely needed, because you do give off that, like, I got this. But I think that has sort of unwrapped you and opened you up to be able to be helped and to be loved and cared for.
It's so hard to ask for help when you're that. I'm that girl. Because I worked my way through a grief that people saw. I was probably the first of anyone that anyone knew who had lost a parent so young. I was in my 20s. My mom was 50. And then you become the person that people want to know, how did you do it? And it's something you learn to live with. It's not something you get over. It's not something you go around. It's not something you beat. It just is something that you go through.
Yeah, I mean, I think like before Bella passed away, I mean, you were going through it, you're going through and still are. And I think that, as Emma's friend and business partner, I was rallying around her through this time, I mean, it was, and still am. We have a togetherness, in our circumstances. That's this thing called life. I think that it's just been really great to like have Emma and like we can show up for each other. She's shown up so much for me. What I'm trying to say is that like, it's important to have this community, like your people, and, Emma's and I's relationship was one thing. And then, when Bella passed, like now we're like journeying together, unfortunately and fortunately because of our circumstances.
Because we have this common thread.
Yeah.
And I think the community part of it is so important that's why I think it's so beautiful to be able to talk about our grief and what we're feeling so that we can bring a community around you and you don't feel so alone and isolated. You can speak with others and you feel a part of and can, like our grief is different, but I get Helen and I know she gets me. And there's something really beautiful and unifying about that.
How profound. I mean, we need to be seen, heard, and witnessed in our grief. Bottom line, nobody can do this alone. Nobody should do this alone. And yet so many do. And so I always call group work a wisdom exchange. You two are so lucky to have already known each other and to have been able to see this on such a deep level, right? You already had that fondness for one another and that openness and the safety that you created. And we don't often find that, right? We feel like we're not going to be able to show up as our 360-degree self at work if we let somebody know, if we have those days where we're falling apart. Like, I wish we could call into work greasy like we do like a common cold because we deserve it. We deserve it. We don't know. We don't know when these waves are going to come or these dates on the calendar, that death anniversaries and, doctor's appointments and birthdays and holidays and maybe just a trip to the grocery where you see your loved one's favorite food, for goodness sake. We just don't know. We just don't know. It's so overwhelming. And I always say group and what you guys just explained is kind of a wisdom exchange. Like, I may not have the words, but somebody else may. And I can hear what you say and see myself in your story. Or perhaps it's somebody that's a year ahead or 3 years ahead. And, I say I'm a hope dealer because someone else can just see hope, that there's hope down the line, that there's hope that there will be joy, that there will be life, that there will always be grief and there will always be loss and there will always be missing Bella. There will always be the wish that we are not living with enormous memory loss. And it's life-changing and life-altering. But that there is still joy. I always say that we can hold it in both hands. We touch joy and we can know joy and we can see that there is a full life, even with grief on board.
Yeah. I mean, I always say like, in the very beginning, I mean, like joy finds you, you have to kind of be open for joy to find you. And it will, if you're able to like be open for it. It took a little bit of work for myself personally to get to that, like after the shock and the initial trauma and all that was that. But, then, joy started, coming in and like what we do at Make Time, it's something that gives me joy. I find joy in the work that Emma and I do. I think that we should get into the tip part. Like, how are some tips that people can do grief tending? If you can give, we always love to ask for 3 really actionable things that our listeners can do that will, that can help.
If you have any of the dates that I was saying on the calendar, let's say, you have a big anniversary date on the calendar and you can get ahead of either reframing that day or making a plan for that day. It doesn't matter to me if you absolutely ditch the plan, but having some, autonomy, some control, something that you're looking forward to ahead of the day, whether that's surrounding yourself with, a good friend. Maybe, on my mom's birthday, we buy something at discount. She was like an Olympic discount shopper. And so we buy something discount on her birthday. We've completely taken back the night on Mother's Day and we celebrate on Saturday. It was really, really hard for us. It's a very difficult day for so many. So I say, make a plan, make a plan, make a plan ahead of the day. We'll always and forever think that writing is one of the greatest tools. Being your own story witness, finding a safe container. Journaling is a way of expressing yourself that is profound. It is a way of connecting also with a loved one. You can write to them. As you were saying, how hard it is sometimes to know the joy is there. I say sometimes just make a list of delights. Sometimes folks ask grievers, like, keep a gratitude practice. And sure, there's lots of good, shiny science about how good that is for you. And I'm sure there are things that we can all be grateful for. But I always feel like that's such heavy lifting to ask a griever for. And so I say, just a list of delights. So that first sip of coffee, that, whatever it is. And I think once you notice delight, you can notice more. Like delight begets delight, just as you were saying. If you see joy, you can see it again. And it's just those small things. I would say lastly, find your support system. Find your support system. It might be a whole new group of people. And that may not be your regular friend group. They may not understand wholly or fully. And so that might be finding a grief support group. That might be finding just one other person that you feel really comfortable, but find yourself support. Again, this is not a solo journey. This cannot be done on your own. Nobody should grieve alone. And so also remember to be someone that supports a griever. Sometimes I say, write down the dates that are important to somebody close to you. I have so many death anniversaries in my phone, but just that check-in, even after the first year, is urgently important.
Can you give a couple of other? I think that's so important for people to know. How can they be supportive to someone that's just lost someone?
Yeah, I always say cooks. Like if you don't want me to cook for you, but if you cook, you're the one that shows up with the casserole. I'm the one that sits next to you and just sits in the muck. This stinks. This sucks. This is the worst. But I'm just gonna sit with you and companion you through this. Show up. Show up as your whole self and your most authentic self. Sometimes it's the person that has like beautiful poetry book to drop off to you. Sometimes it's someone who allows you to know that there will be life after. I'm checking in on your heart. No need to text back. Give them permission to not have to do a thing, but to just know that you're there. We can all do that. Saying nothing is unacceptable.
It's the worst.
So if it feels hard for you to show up and say something, pop a card in the mail. Pop a card in the mail.
What has been helpful for you, Helen? Like what has been meaningful for you, impactful?
Oh boy. I mean, like this was, just yesterday I got that call, like, hey, Helen, Tim, checking in, calling, tell you I love you. You don't need to call me back. Just thinking about you. Hope you're doing. And I'm here, I got that call yesterday from a friend of mine. I think that this was all just so wild, right? Like a ride that I never expected that I'd be on. And I lost grandparents and friends but when we lost Bella, I was so fortunate actually that I had so many people show up for me, and from places and times where I just had so many people from my childhood, that I hadn't talked to in decades, people that I worked with in different companies. My friends just put this like circle of bubble wrap around me, and Emma and my husband and my friend. I mean, just like, I think that in those first weeks, the first beginning, I just was like, everybody had me. And that was very important to me. Like, cause I knew it, I knew that people were around and that I was okay. Unfortunately, grief changes your entire world. You lose someone and your whole entire world changes. And that is my experience. And I have like beautiful, strong friendships, and I've lost people. Mm-hmm. I've lost a lot of people in addition to losing Bella. Mm-hmm. And that's just the reality. Some people they don't have the space to hold for you. And that's okay. And you'll find people that you didn't even expect, that show up and check on you. And, my daughter was a singer, and like one of her people that enjoys her music, I don't even know who this person is. And she'll tag one of Bella's songs on Spotify and tag me and tell me like why that's her favorite song and how much it means to her. Oh, I mean, like,
That's so beautiful.
It's like I think it's the kindness from people that I don't know, that I find like
become friends, and some friends become strangers. It is so true. And a lot of it depends on how we understood grief. Some of us have experienced a loss, and for good or bad, we become accustomed to being able to sit with it, being able to hold space. There's just so many people that can't even sit with the discomfort. It's sad. People that you depended on, that you thought would be there in a pinch, it becomes very different. And you become very different on the other side of your loss. It sort of shakes everything into this new cosmic shift of what really is important, the most important in our lives.
To answer Emma's question, I think that just the thinking of, just the wishes and the I'm checking in and like, I love you. It's very meaningful. And it's also very meaningful to me when people ask me to talk about Bella.
Yeah.
And just like, I have a young girl that I work with. And she was just like, tell me about her,
It's the best.
And that was like, and she's this young girl, they're the same age. And it was just like, when people ask me and like, just sit down and really want to learn about like what she was like and what she liked and kind of just what Bella's vibe was, like that is really, because I want to talk about Bella. Like I love talking about Bella. And I talk to Bella every day, and she still has this profound impact on my life. Like every single day she shapes me, and being her mother shapes me. And so I think when people just that don't know me, who I come in contact with, like, and just, like the days too, like the days can really suck. Like, this, like the days can suck. And so like the Mother's Days, the Angel Wing anniversaries, and I do my best to celebrate because that's what Bella would want, and, but I think that when people check in and just come in to feel you a little bit.
Yeah. And remember her with you, for you, allow you to, that's why that question, tell me their name, is so important, because even a stranger will open up to story. Like that's an invitation for you to be able to say Bella, and we named her Bella because, or she, she was a musician, it opens a conversation, and it's just, we want to remember them. We're the keeper of their memories. We're the keeper of keeping their memories alive.
Can I go back to what we were talking about with, for some people, how it's difficult to show up? And do you think that has to do with the fact that they haven't, maybe you already said this, but the fact that they haven't gone through a loss?
For some, and for others, it's just, it's kind of a toxically positive kind of world we live in now. Like everybody wants everybody to be like happy and well and having a good day. And, that's really hard. The reality is that people, the majority of people, if you ask them, have all experienced a loss. It's just that we may have grown up in a household where nobody really talked about it. My dad lost his dad when he was 7. I grew up in a house where it was very apparent when someone experienced a loss. My dad was so good at saying the right thing. I witnessed standing with him, saying what I thought would be so awful, and seeing people comforted by his words. And that was really him just allowing them to talk. It was just opening a conversation, but he always seemed to just know just the right thing to say, with warmth and understanding, and not shying away from having those difficult conversations. And they are difficult. We don't know what to say. And we think if we say the wrong thing, that we will upset the person or make them more sad or remind them. We're not forgetting that we lost our loved one. You're not reminding us. We know that each and every day, exactly what we're reckoning with. You're not reminding us. When you don't speak about them, it's just the hollowest echo. Like, we know it's the elephant in the room. Like, we know you're not talking about it. It's so obvious. We want to. We want to. So it's all of that, I think.
Emma, one thing that you say often, and I know like Emma just got done writing this beautiful book and it's better out than in. Can you talk a little bit about like your writing and how Emma really has been writing? So I'd love to hear about, how that's helped you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been so much unprocessed emotions and feelings around my husband and his disease. And, so many things that I've kept really close and tight and personal, and it has not been helpful for me. So I think there's just been such beauty in being able to write this book, share parts of our story, my feelings. It has really then, that was this whole idea of it's better out than keeping it in. And, one of the reasons why I want to, share and help another caregiver is because I want to build a community around myself as well. I mean, it feels sometimes can be very isolating, and that is a very lonely, sad place to be in. And I really want to be able to connect with others who understand this experience. So if it's with frontal temporal dementia, being a caregiver, someone who has walked through the world of dementia, and for you, losing a daughter, I feel like connection is so important. It's just so important. It's so meaningful. It's so impactful. And that is what I yearn for. Like, that is what I need. And that is what I am hopefully doing.
You're doing it.
Am I doing it?
Yeah,
That's exactly how I want to. We were caretaking for my dad for a decade. And I found so much permission in the words that you shared. Nobody was talking about it. No one was talking about, anticipatory loss. We're grieving while we're caring for our loved one, and they're very much alive. And we often don't have a minute in the day to be supported because nobody has died. A lot of people don't recognize this as a time of great grief. And supporting a caregiver is a whole other world that we could talk about for days. But I think the writing itself, we use a part of our brain that responds in healing, especially when we write by hand. It's safe. Your notebook is safe. It's a place where you can really lay down and also see it outside of yourself. I always say we're always looking for movement.
Yeah, writing is so therapeutical. I mean, it's
for me. It is for me.
Helped tremendously, and uncover things that I didn't even know that I was feeling or thinking, and it just kind of poured out of me.
I think, I was with you and was there to experience and support you when you started just talking about, just to be able to talk about it. And like, this is what we're going through, and hear people that have helped me. Like, I think your capacity to share has been it's just been very inspirational to me. And it's helped me to be like, okay, like I can talk about this, because you need to tend to your grief. And I'm an extremely busy person, when Bella was alive, since Bella's left us and on her journey. And so that penciling the time in, I mean, I've been going to therapy every single Wednesday for the last, year and 3/4. And that is my time. And I know every week that I have that time, and I think about what I'm going to share in that time. I start putting my what my grief week has looked like together. And I know that I have this place and this beautiful therapist where I can share it there, leave it there, and then get back into it. And that's what I do.
Yeah, that's exactly what grief tending does, though. If I know I have 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is you do to set yourself up, sometimes I light a candle and I do a little bit of writing, and then I blow the candle out. And that's my time to be with it. Maybe it's a crying time, maybe it's the therapist's office, whatever that is for you. But I think when we do make that space, we allow it to take up space in our lives so that it doesn't come over us. And it still will. It's just a way, like you said, you think all week, where am I going to put this? Something comes up. You're like, oh, on Wednesday, this is what I'm going to tell her. That can also go in the notebook. I always say, like, how is my grief today can be your daily prompt. And all you need to do is write down, how is my grief today? Could be a few words to check in. It's not how long you spend. It's that you do spend a little bit of time just checking in. Where is it showing up in my body?
Yeah, tending to it. You got to tend to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to double click again.
Go.
So I think also planning, I know that like you're so there for me. Like Emma's always like, okay, what are you doing on Thanksgiving? Like what's going on? Like talk to me about it. And I mean, I need to make a plan to go into a Sephora. Right. So like, I mean, it's something that I enjoyed with my daughter. And I mean, I'm like, hey, Bella, like we're going into Sephora. This is the mission, because I can't find myself like meandering around a Sephora. Like I'll just completely lose it. Right. So like I have a plan. I know like I need to get a mascara, a face wash, whatever. And then we're getting out of there. And then also, for the days, and I really, like my friends, Emma and my husband, and I have to shout out to Tim here. Like, I mean, he has filled every weekend, every moment, every spare minute of time that, to just make sure I wasn't wandering. And I think the planning and having planners around you, is so important when you're walking through this.
And penciling in that next thing to look forward to is also grief tending. All of those things. What can I look forward to? And you may put it in the calendar. It may feel like you don't, ask me. I might not show up, but please ask me, invite me, plan with me. I want to be included. I still want to be invited. Ask me. Don't make those decisions for me either. Continue to ask me, or ask, if I know that's hard for you, I'm going to ask you if you want to go to Sephora. Do you need company?
Yeah.
If I know that's hard for you, if I was around the corner, that's what I just heard that. And that's what I would do with you and for you. Let's go together.
Yeah. And like, by the way, I didn't actually know that. I don't know why I didn't know that about you, but we were in New York a couple of months ago and I needed to go to Sephora.
Yeah.
And Helen's like, we're going into Sephora. We're going to go get you the hair things that you needed. And she rallied. We went in and we got out, and God bless her. Like Helen you can rally for your people.
I can't rally.
She's incredible. I'm so proud to be her friend.
So proud to be your friend.
Okay, let's do this one. Barri, what are you not making time for that you're going to commit to making more time for today?
My book.
Oh.
Yeah. I've written many about things that are outside of the grief space, from what I say was like from chapter 1 about design and collectibles. I definitely have what I call the memory circle monologues up my sleeve, where I want to take everybody's grief stories, death and non-death stories. We can read each other's stories. They can be read aloud and others can witness them. And I think, just like the two of you are saying, many don't have a circle around them. I have client after client that has no one. They have me. And sometimes, in my widows group, they don't even have their emergency contact has changed. I've landed, I'm taking off, I've landed has changed. Seeing a little nugget of something in someone else's story that you can see yourself in, I think that's the camaraderie that you're saying. So whether or not it is actually a group around you, sometimes it's just those words, like those Me Too moments where you're like, oh, I feel that way too. And you feel this sense of relief and also this beautiful sense of connection. So I'm really going to make a concerted effort. I write a lot about grief for clients. I write a lot about my mom. I write a lot to my mom, a really connective way of keeping her alive for myself. The book.
I love a book.
I love a book too. And I have to say, from someone who's out there, the nuggets that I get from people that have written books about grief have been very meaningful to me. And I'm a big supporter. So I hope that when you write your book, I'd love to have you come back. We can talk all about it.
So sweet. My grief books have grief books. I send people to memoir all the time, people's personal accounts. I think that's where you really, if you start there, I think you see that other people's stories, maybe it's just that they have survived the most unthinkable, is the hope. And that is all each day that we can ask for. A little bit of hope, a little bit of joy. And as that, I always say it's like a big black piece of paper, and you can like punch even a pinhole and see that the light can come through. Even in a pinhole, my clients keep that visual with them, because they're like, it's all it takes. Just a little bit of light. Just show me that can be, that I am in the world and still of the world, and that I'm going to be okay. And inviting people into your story. It's so brave. It's so vulnerable. And it's the way that we can carry this, make this less of a shadowed, we're all going to grieve at some point. So let's talk about it. I'm so grateful to both of you that we're having this conversation.
So, for people who are learning about going through grief, whether it's anticipatory or they've lost someone, or they just have, perhaps they've been carrying it around for so long, and how do they find you?
How do they find me? I'm the Memory Circle everywhere. TheMemoryCircle.com, at the Memory Circle on Instagram. I answer all the DMs. I'm the mailroom. I want to be the one that meets you, that talks to you. I hold groups. They meet in 6-week sessions. We begin. I always think it's so nice. We begin and we move through together. We have a beginning and an ending for every 6 weeks. And they come back and we can continue how we want to carry forward and what we want to leave behind. Like you said, well, can I just rest right here? Whether it's group or a one-on-one or an in-person writing group. And I also do retreats. And that's really when you just like come for 3 days, 4 days, and really talk about grief tending, really just check out of life and check into full-on grief tending support.
Before we started today, you guys were both sharing about these cards. I don't want to forget about the cards. So share your cards with us.
Yeah.
Sure. This is called the Remember and Reflect deck. This is basically some 50 cards. There's 50 because my mom was 50 when she died. So it's a little wink to Ellen. But on the back of each card, it has a way to honor your grief daily. So if you are not one that is going to create your own practice, you just pull a card. Some of them are affirmations. Some of them are writing prompts. Some of them are activities to do outdoors. And they're a little color coded, and they're just, you pick one, name 10 sounds that you heard this morning. Open your senses to what you hear around you. They're simple. They're things that I share in circle. It's sort of like Barry-isms. They come in this little cute drawstring pouch. And, you just pull one, sort of like a little inspiration deck.
I just bought 5 of them because I was like, I just thought, when someone passes, I don't know. I just felt like it would be something nice. Send a card and send that deck. That's what I thought.
That's what made it, Emma. People were like, what can you send to a griever? And I always say, just send the deck. And you just, when they're ready, you just keep it by your bedside. It's a little inspiration and easy.
Yeah, I loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. Well, Barri, thank you so much for coming on today. This was super meaningful, and I'm happy that it's an important conversation that we need to be having.
Yeah, thank you so much, really. And thank you so much for what you're doing in the world. It's so needed. And I just thank you for your work. And I'm so glad that we're able to make time with you here today.
Thank you both.